We spend our entire lives without most of us ever really thinking about this. We live in a world that ranks people by intelligence. At the office, in conversation, in standardized tests, job performance, beauty standards, and somewhere beneath all of it, we quietly sort people into categories: smart, average, slow. But what does psychology actually say about those who sit at the very bottom of the IQ spectrum? Because the real answer, the one supported by decades of neuroscience and behavioral research, might completely change the way you see the human mind. Today we're diving into the psychology of extremely low IQ, what it actually means neurologically, how the brain experiences the world differently, and why understanding this reveals something surprising about intelligence itself. Let's start with what the numbers actually mean. IQ, or intelligence quotient, measures specific cognitive abilities: reasoning, problem solving, processing speed, working memory. The average sits at 100. Psychologists classify anything below 70 as intellectual disability. Below 50 is considered severe impairment. Below 20 or 25, profound. But here is where modern psychology gets genuinely interesting. These numbers do not describe a broken brain. They describe a differently organized brain. And that distinction is not merely semantic. It changes everything about how we should understand these individuals. Now let's talk about what is actually happening inside the brain. Research using fMRI imaging consistently shows that individuals with significantly low IQ have reduced white matter connectivity, particularly in the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for abstract reasoning, long-term planning, cause and effect thinking, and impulse control. In severe intellectual disability, this connectivity does not simply develop slowly. In many cases, it develops along an entirely different pathway. Tasks that most adults process automatically, reading social cues, anticipating consequences, understanding metaphor and sarcasm, require enormous cognitive effort, and sometimes they remain permanently out of reach. But here's the paradox that stops cognitive researchers in their tracks. The very individuals who cannot solve a basic math problem or follow a multi-step instruction will often demonstrate something that is frequently missing in higher functioning people: emotional accuracy. They read the room not through logic, but through pure feeling. Studies published in the Journal of Intellectual Disability Research show that individuals with profound cognitive impairment consistently respond to emotional tone, facial expression, and relational warmth with a sensitivity that surprises trained clinicians. Why? Because the limbic system, the emotional core of the brain, operates largely independently from the prefrontal cortex. And in many of these individuals, the limbic system is completely intact. Here is a real example that puts this into perspective. Researchers studying adults with IQs below 40 in long-term care facilities documented something remarkable. These individuals could not tell you the day of the week. They could not reliably count to 10, but they knew, with striking consistency, which staff members genuinely liked them and which did not. They knew who was having a bad day. They noticed absences. They grieved losses. One caregiver described it this way: "He cannot read a single word, but he reads people better than anyone I have ever seen." That is not poetic exaggeration. That is neuroscience. The brain always finds a way to process the world. It just does not always use the same route. This brings us to something deeper, something cognitive psychology has been wrestling with for decades. Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences directly challenged the idea that IQ captures anything close to the full picture of human cognition. Linguistic intelligence, spatial intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, bodily kinesthetic intelligence. Gardner's argument was simple, but radical. We designed IQ tests to predict performance in academic environments. That is all. Then we made the catastrophic mistake of treating those scores as a measure of human cognitive worth. And the data from individuals with extremely low IQ completely exposes that mistake. Because when you test these individuals not on abstract reasoning, but on procedural memory, emotional recognition, loyalty, and the capacity to form genuine attachment, they do not score at the bottom. Many of them score at the top. There's also a behavioral dimension that most people never consider. Psychologists studying adaptive behavior in individuals with profound intellectual disability have found something that fundamentally challenges our assumptions about learning. These individuals learn, just not in the way we expect. Repetition, routine, and emotional reinforcement are the primary channels. A child with an IQ of 30 cannot understand why a stove is dangerous, but after one painful experience, they will never touch it again. The procedural memory system, seated deep in the basal ganglia and cerebellum, operates independently from general intelligence. It stores experience directly, no reasoning required. This is why many individuals with profoundly low IQ develop reliable daily routines, strong preferences, consistent habits, and genuine skill in specific repeated tasks. Their brain is constantly learning, just through a completely different door. So what is the actual psychological takeaway here? And why does it matter beyond a clinical context? Because understanding the psychology of extremely low IQ forces us to face a question we almost never ask directly. When we measure intelligence, what are we actually measuring? We are measuring a narrow band of cognitive function, abstract reasoning in a controlled environment. And we have built an entire social hierarchy on top of that single measurement. The research is telling us something we should be willing to hear. The experiences most central to being human, love, fear, grief, joy, loyalty, connection, do not live in the prefrontal cortex. They live in older, deeper brain structures that preceded abstract thought by millions of years in evolution, and no IQ test was ever designed to touch them. Understanding individuals with extremely low IQ does not only make us more compassionate, it makes us more accurate about what the human brain actually is. And perhaps, if we are paying attention, it makes us a little more humble about what we think we know.